Ever wish you could, like, test out a ton of trading strategies, but without actually risking any money?
Yeah.
That's what optimization in AmiBroker lets you do, and that's what we're going to be diving into today.
Sounds good.
So you gave us some really interesting video tutorials, all transcribed, by the way, so they're easy to reference, that introduce this whole concept of optimization.
Right.
Walk us through, how it works in AmiBroker, and they even touch on in-sample versus out-of-sample data.
Yeah, that's a really important concept. And
It is, yeah.
what I think is so fascinating about this whole topic is that we're basically stepping into the world of algorithmic trading.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at how to use the power of computers to really fine-tune your trading strategies and maybe uncover a few surprises from the source material along the way.
Okay, let's unpack this a little bit.
Sure.
What exactly is optimization in this context?
So optimization is essentially like a laboratory for your trading ideas.
Okay.
Imagine being able to tweak different parts of your strategy, things like how long you hold a stock or where you set your stop loss, and then seeing how those adjustments play out, over time.
Right.
Optimization in AmiBroker lets you do exactly that,
Gotcha.
but on a massive scale.
So instead of manually testing one little change at a time,
Yeah,
AmiBroker can run through tons of combinations to see what might work best.
precisely.
Okay.
You define the parameters. You want to adjust things like the length of a moving average or the percentage used for your stop loss. You set a range of values for each of those, and then AmiBroker goes to work, testing all those different combinations.
Wow.
And crunching the numbers to see which ones might have performed best, historically.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So how does it actually work in AmiBroker?
So-
I remember from the tutorials there was something called the optimize function.
Yes, the optimize function.
Yes.
It's like your control panel for this whole process.
Okay.
It automates the testing of all those parameter combinations. And in one of the tutorials, they use a really great example where they adjust the slow-moving average period in a trading strategy. And they actually walk you through, like step by step, how to set that up in AmiBroker.
I remember that example.
Yeah.
It seemed pretty straightforward to set up, but I was a bit lost when it got to the results table. Well, what are we actually looking for in all those numbers?
Well, it's not just about picking the highest profit number and calling it a day.
Right.
The results table shows you how the strategy performed with each combination of parameters.
Okay.
And it highlights key metrics, things like net profit, max drawdown, and something called risk-adjusted return.
Okay, risk-adjusted return. That sounds important. What is that exactly?
It's a way to evaluate performance that takes into account the level of risk involved.
Okay.
So imagine you've got two strategies, and they both make a 10% profit.
Okay.
Sounds equal, right?
Yeah.
But what if one strategy took huge risks to get there,
Oh.
while the other one was much more conservative? That's where risk-adjusted return comes in.
Gotcha.
It helps you identify strategies that deliver those solid returns without taking on that excessive risk.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the whole picture, not just focus on the profits.
Exactly. And those tutorials you gave really emphasize that.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that balance between profit and risk.
Yeah. Now, the tutorials also mention something about period, percent, and number for optimization.
Yes.
What was that all about?
Yeah, that's a really critical part of actually setting up your optimization. You have to decide on the range of values you want AmiBroker to test for each parameter.
Right.
So a period might be something like the length of a moving average that's measured in days. A percent could be your stop loss percentage.
Okay.
And a number might be something like the number of shares you buy.
Gotcha.
So it's not just about what you're tweaking,
Right.
but also the range you're exploring within each tweak.
Yeah, makes sense.
Exactly.
So it sounds like you really need to think carefully about those ranges.
Yes.
Or you could end up with some pretty wacky results.
Absolutely. And that brings us to one of the most important points that's highlighted in the source material,
Oh.
which is the danger of curve fitting.
Yeah. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
I remember one of the tutorial examples showed a strategy that looked amazing on paper,
Right.
but then completely tanked when they tried it out on new data.
Yes. Classic case of curve fitting.
So it aced the test, but failed in the real world.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Well, essentially the optimization process might find parameter combinations that perfectly exploit the quirks and patterns of the historical data you fed it.
Okay.
But remember, the market is always changing.
Right.
If your strategy is just a product of, overfitting to a specific set of past conditions, it might just completely fall apart when faced with new data.
That's a bit scary.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid falling into this trap?
So that's where the concept of in-sample versus out-of-sample data comes in.
Okay.
The data used for optimization is your in-sample data.
Right.
And it's crucial to test your optimized strategies on separate out-of-sample data that was not part of that initial process.
So you're testing to see if the strategy can, like, generalize to new situations, not just memorize the past.
Exactly. That's how you can tell if you've stumbled upon a genuinely robust strategy or if you've just become a master of historical trivia.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
A master of historical trivia. Yeah.
Works on the test, but not in the real world.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
All right. I'm starting to see why this distinction between in-sample and out-of-sample data is so important.
Good.
But how do we actually put this into practice?
Yeah.
Is it just a matter of running a back test on a different time period?
Well, that's one approach, but I think let's break it down a bit further so you can really see how it works.
Okay.
Imagine you've got 10 years of historical data for a particular stock or market.
Okay, 10 years of data, that's a good chunk of history to work with.
Exactly. So in a simple in-sample, out-of-sample setup, you might split that data into, say, 7 years for in-sample optimization and 3 years for out-of-sample testing.
So AmiBroker would use those first 7 years to find the, like, quote-unquote, best settings for my strategy.
Right.
And then I'd test those settings on the remaining 3 years of data to see how it holds up.
You got it. But remember, the market is always evolving.
Right, yeah.
A strategy that crushed it from 2010 to 2017 might completely flop from 2018 to 2020.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why it's so crucial to choose your out-of-sample period really carefully.
Okay.
Making sure it's truly representative of the kind of market conditions you might encounter in, real-world trading.
So how do we choose the right out-of-sample period? Do we just pick a random chunk of time?
Well, random isn't always the best approach.
Okay.
Ideally, you want your out-of-sample period to reflect a variety of market conditions. So bull markets, bear markets, sideways trends, so you can see how your strategy performs across all these different scenarios.
That makes sense. So it's not just about finding a strategy that works in any market. It's about finding one that can, like, adapt to different markets.
Precisely. And that brings us to a more advanced technique that they mentioned in the source material.
Okay.
Called walk-forward testing.
I remember seeing that term, but to be honest, I kind of skimmed over it.
Yeah.
It sounded a bit intimidating.
It might sound complex, but it's a really powerful way to validate your strategies.
Okay.
And make sure they're not just flukes.
Gotcha.
So instead of a single out-of-sample test,
Right.
imagine running a series of tests, moving forward through time.
So instead of just testing on those last 3 years of data, like in that previous example, we're breaking it up into smaller chunks and testing as we go.
You're getting the idea. Let's go back to our 10 years of data.
Okay.
In walk-forward testing, you might start by optimizing on the first 5 years and then testing on the 6th year.
Gotcha.
Then you'd incorporate that 6th year into your in-sample data, re-optimize, and test on the 7th year.
So the window of data we're using is constantly shifting forward.
Exactly. And this does a couple of really important things.
Okay.
First, it helps you simulate how you would have adapted your strategy over time as new data became available.
Right.
Second, it kind of addresses the problem of limited data.
I see.
You're not using up all your data in a single optimization and test.
Right.
You're constantly reevaluating, refining your approach.
That sounds much more realistic than just hoping a single back test will, like, predict the future.
Yeah, exactly.
But wouldn't this take forever to do manually?
That's where AmiBroker comes in handy. It has built-in features to automate walk-forward testing.
Oh, good.
So you don't have to spend hours manually adjusting your data and running tests.
That's a relief.
Yeah.
It sounds like walk-forward testing is a pretty crucial tool for, like, serious algorithmic traders.
I would say so, yeah.
Especially if they're dealing with a lot of data and, complex strategies.
Absolutely. And the source material you provided actually showcases this technique in action.
Okay.
Highlighting how powerful it can be for validating a strategy's robustness. They even give some specific examples of how to set it up and interpret walk-forward tests in AmiBroker.
Okay, so we've got optimization, in-sample and out-of-sample data, and now walk-forward testing. I'm starting to feel like I'm really getting a handle on this.
You're doing great, but remember, even with all these tools and techniques, there's one crucial element that no optimization algorithm can replace.
Uh-oh, what's that? Wait, what do you mean by that? I thought the whole point of algorithmic trading was to, like, let the computer do the thinking.
Well, to a certain extent, yes.
Okay.
But you're the one who sets the goals, defines the parameters, interprets the results,
Right.
and ultimately decides whether strategy is worth pursuing.
So it's not just about crunching numbers. It's about understanding the meaning behind those numbers.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really important point that the source material kind of hinted at,
Okay.
the limits of optimization.
Okay, this sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
Well, think about it this way. Even the most sophisticated optimization process is still limited by the data you feed it.
Okay.
It can only find patterns and relationships within the historical data it's given.
So what happens when the market, throws us a curveball? Something that's never happened before.
That's when things get really interesting.
Okay.
Optimization can't predict black swan events.
Right.
Or sudden market shifts that are just completely outside the realm of historical data.
That's a sobering thought.
It is.
So are we saying optimization is useless?
Not at all. It's still an incredibly powerful tool
Okay.
for refining and improving your strategies.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to remember that it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, I'm really curious to hear more about what those other pieces might be.
Yeah.
What else should we be thinking about besides just optimizing our parameters?
That's a great question, and I think it's the perfect segue into the next part of our discussion.
Okay.
We need to shift our focus from the technical aspects of optimization to the strategic side of things.
I'm all ears. Okay, so we're back. And, we're ready to kind of wrap up our deep dive into AmiBroker optimization.
Sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground. We talked about the optimized function itself, the importance of out-of-sample testing.
Right.
And even walk-forward analysis.
Yes, a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff.
So as we shift into this, final part of our conversation,
Okay.
I want to kind of challenge you to think beyond just the technical aspects of optimization.
Okay.
We've seen how powerful it can be.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's important to remember that optimization is just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to building a successful trading strategy.
You're saying there's more to it than just finding those, perfect settings?
Exactly. Remember that example from the source material where the seemingly optimized strategy just completely bombed when they tested it on new data?
Oh, yeah. That was a real eye-opener.
Yeah, it really highlights a crucial point.
Yeah.
Even with all that meticulous optimization and validation, a strategy that performs really well in one period might just fail spectacularly in another.
Because the market is always changing, and past performance is no guarantee of future results.
Precisely. And this is where your understanding of market dynamics and your ability to adapt become even more important than the optimization process itself.
So it's not enough to just be a technical whiz with AmiBroker.
Right.
You need to understand the bigger picture.
Absolutely. Optimization can help you refine, a strategy's internal logic, but it can't necessarily predict or account for all those external factors that can influence market behavior.
Right.
Think about things like economic indicators, geopolitical events,
All right.
even something as seemingly intangible as market sentiment.
Yeah, those are all factors that could throw a wrench into even the most carefully optimized strategy.
Exactly. And that's why experienced algorithmic traders often incorporate elements of adaptability and risk management into their approach.
So it's not just about maximizing profits, it's about managing risk and, being prepared for the unexpected.
Precisely. And in one of the tutorials, they mentioned the importance of position sizing as part of the optimization process.
Yeah, they were talking about how many shares to buy or sell on a given trade.
Right. And while optimizing position size can help you fine-tune your risk exposure, it's also crucial to have a broader risk management plan in place.
Okay.
This might involve setting overall portfolio limits, using stop-loss orders to protect against those, significant losses.
Yeah.
And even having a plan for how to react to those unforeseen black swan events that we talked about.
So even if my AmiBroker strategy is telling me to go all in on a particular trade, I need to have the discipline to say, hold on, let's consider the bigger picture.
Exactly. You're the captain of the ship.
Right.
The optimization tools are there to assist you, but you're ultimately responsible for making the decisions.
That makes a lot of sense, but it also sounds a bit overwhelming, there's so many factors to consider.
It can be a lot to take in, but remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
Algorithmic trading, like any other form of trading, is a process of continuous learning, experimentation, and adaptation.
So where do we go from here? What are some practical steps we can take to, incorporate this broader perspective into our approach?
Well, one suggestion from the source material that really stood out to me was the idea of incorporating additional data sources beyond just price and volume.
You mean things like economic data, sentiment indicators, even news headlines?
Exactly. The more information your strategy has access to, the better equipped it might be to, adapt to changing market conditions.
Right.
Remember, optimization works best when it has a rich and diverse data set to analyze.
This is starting to sound a bit like machine learning or artificial intelligence, where algorithms are trained on massive data sets to identify complex patterns.
Yeah, there's definitely some overlap there. And in fact, machine learning techniques are becoming increasingly popular in the world of algorithmic trading.
Oh, wow.
But that's a whole other deep dive for another day.
I think you're right. We've covered a lot of ground already.
We have. So as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with a few key takeaways from our deep dive into AmiBroker optimization.
Okay, I'm all ears.
First, remember that optimization is a powerful tool, but it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
It can help you refine your strategies, potentially improve your results, but it can't eliminate risk or predict the future.
Okay, what's number 2?
Number 2, always, always, always test your optimized strategies on out-of-sample data. This is absolutely crucial to ensure that your strategy isn't just a product of curve fitting.
And number 3?
Don't get so caught up in the technical details that you lose sight of the bigger picture. Remember that the market is a complex, dynamic system influenced by a multitude of factors beyond the scope of any optimization algorithm.
So it's all about finding that balance between technical proficiency and strategic awareness.
Precisely. And as you continue your exploration of algorithmic trading, keep in mind that it's a journey of continuous learning and discovery.
Yeah.
There's always something new to learn, a new technique to explore, a new challenge to overcome.
This has been a really insightful deep dive.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.